Hello, beautiful souls. So, today I wanted to talk all about uncertainty on the spiritual path and why, as confusing as it might sound, is actually really important for the spiritual awakening journey. And it really is a sign that you're actually on the right path. And I'm going to explain why in this video. But I first wanted to really explain the overall kind of concept of uncertainty, right? I think a lot of us really understand what it means, right? To not be certain and not be sure of things. But uncertainty as it relates to on the spiritual journey and the spiritual awakening journey is something that really comes from a deeper place, because you really begin to kind of enter this kind of really kind of like fork in the road, right? Where the ego's need for security really begins to weaken, right? Now that you're no longer living in the ego. And you begin to really reach this very introspective place within yourself. And you're asking these questions like, what should I do now? And what is the right direction that I should take in my life, right? You might notice that so much of your life has fallen apart. You know, you've gone through a dark night of the soul, relationships have changed. And I just want to say, if you're going through that, if you have gone through that previously, or you're currently going through that, it's a really difficult place to be in. And it's something that, again, so many spiritual seekers and people who undergo a spiritual awakening really experience. It's almost like really integral to the process, honestly. So this is kind of what it means to be uncertain, right? A lot of us begin our spiritual awakening journeys kind of wanting this roadmap of how we should now live our lives, right? Now that we've had this inner awakening. And we want, answers. We want people to tell us what direction to go in. But so many people realize very quickly that that's not the reality. And you're, again, faced with this tremendous amount of uncertainty of what direction to take your life in. But really, I'm here to tell you that uncertainty is incredibly common and really quite paramount to the overall process of, again, the spiritual awakening journey. Because really, there is no clear roadmap. There is no rigid rules and, again, kind of structure of how you should now live your life once you've kind of broken free from the barriers of the ego and the kind of, 3D mind matrix and whatever you want to call it. Now that all these relationships in your life have changed and so many circumstances in your life have changed, you might have, left a job that was no longer good for you, or the kind of situations are endless. But again, as I already mentioned, as awakening deepens, a lot of these certainties and rigid beliefs and expectations start to dissolve. A lot of the ways that we previously lived our lives, knowing kind of how every day is going to happen and really having a clear understanding and a clear picture of, our daily life and how things might pan out. Again, those really begin to change. Those constructs begin to change because the ego is no longer at play. And this is why I say it's really important to understand that this means that you're actually making progress, because the ego is kind of no longer in the game anymore, right? It's no longer running the show. So this is really important to first and foremost realize. What once gave us comfort now begins to fade, and what's now left is this kind of vast open space. And again, this feels very unsettling at first, but once you do more spiritual work, you realize that you can now create such a powerful path for yourself once you're not, again, running from these programs, really, because that's what they are programs that have been ingrained into us throughout our entire lives, right, up until we've had that spiritual awakening journey. So again, it's just really important to understand that it now means that you're living less from the ego and more from the kind of capital D divine, from your kind of higher self, from spaces within you that allow you to really connect to higher consciousness, which is a really beautiful thing. The ego usually relies on the external world staying the same, but that's something that never truly happens. So again, after you undergo this spiritual awakening and you have this feeling of uncertainty, it's such a mixed bag and mixed emotion of feelings. And usually those feelings are heavily rooted in fear and frustration and self-doubt and insecurity and confusion. So again, this is very natural and normal. This kind of uncertainty triggers a lot of discomfort because the mind really desires to seek safety. The kind of ego mind desires to seek safety. But the thing is, when you live your life with so much certainty, it really prevents you from so much personal growth, and it really prevents your consciousness from expanding, because that kind of development, right, and this kind of expansion of your consciousness requires you being in a space of unknown, of vast possibilities, because when we're always certain of our next steps and what has always been the case for us, right, which oftentimes have been lifestyles that don't work, right? Because or else why would you have kind of gone through a dark night of the soul and undergone a spiritual awakening? It's because you were living your life in a way that wasn't conducive, it wasn't serving you. And oftentimes we have no choice but to awaken. This is usually how it goes. We have no choice but to awaken because the suffering is so deep. The dark night of the soul is so intense. And again, what happens after that is this space of our reality kind of breaking down, right? Of what we have always known not working anymore, not being our reality. And we walk away from all that in search of something new. And this is where the uncertainty lies, right? The questions now begin to surface of what should I do? And we want this kind of clear roadmap. But again, it's just not how it works. You need to really honor and embrace uncertainty and be okay with not having the answers, right? And be okay with, instead of what was once your ego mind wanting these constant answers in the mind chatter of what's happening next, which is quite dysfunctional, instead being okay with entering this space of introspection and going within, instead of wanting the answers to come from up here, which again is only a byproduct of the ego, which is the false self, allowing the answers to kind of come from within. Because when you allow the answers to come from within, that is how you know that you're being divinely guided. This is how you know that you're actually having answers that come from, again, this deeper space that ultimately is the truth, right? Is actually what we need to hear intuitively, is from this kind of inner space, right? This is why a lot of people end up having a lot of blockages in the Manipur chakra, because what is this solar center all about, right? It's like our drive, our will, our self-esteem. And when that's blocked, right, it causes all those problems. So being okay with that kind of inner space, right, feeling kind of scary. And again, discovering this inner space that has always been there, but we have never been able to tap into and tune into it because we've always been in our heads. We've always been wanting answers from the mind, from the ego, right? This mind chatter that has often caused a lot of stress and dysfunction. So again, being okay with really living from the body instead of from the head. This is why it feels scary, right? Because the body doesn't give us immediate answers all the time in the way that the mind can. So I just really challenge you to adopt this practice, if you can, of really sitting with yourself and kind of finding this inner spaciousness that, again, is free from the ego mind and allows you to be really in your body. And see what comes up. Maybe you can kind of keep a journal near you, or just really reflect on how you felt after that meditation, or just you being really present with yourself. Because the reality is that uncertainty really invites so much synchronicities, new possibilities. It invites so much beautiful new experiences into your life. But again, you have to really allow it. You have to let it. And then one thing leads to the next and to the next, and you realize that I was actually divinely guided and I didn't need to feel this fear of this uncertainty. Really, so many beautiful possibilities open up in your life when you release this resistance of needing answers and needing the mind to constantly guide you and tell you how to live. Because like I already previously mentioned, so many of us have always lived that way. And what has that caused, right? It's caused a lot of grief. It's caused a lot of depression. It's not really contributed to us living in our highest good. It's also probably had us make bad choices, right, in our lives, and live unconsciously, and have unconscious relationships and unconscious overall events and experiences in our lives. So this is what is really, really important to understand. And really, when you think about it, if you think about a favorite artist of yours, a favorite writer, right, anyone who kind of has really been in the creative space, whether that again is like any kind of artist, they have always operated from this inner spaciousness, because through this inner spaciousness, their creativity comes to the surface, right? So think about a writer. They're not living in their minds. This is why a lot of the times people in creative spaces, they need to take these kind of personal retreats or getaways, and they realize that once they do that, so much more inspiration comes through them, and they're able to do their deep work so much better, because again, they're in this space of no mind. So just even if you yourself have a creative kind of side to you, whether that's a piece of, if you're a musician or a painter or a writer or anything in a creative space, you realize that when you are truly in that space of that art that you're performing, like truly deeply in it, and you're really present with it, you're not in a space that the mind operates from. You're in your body. And therefore, you don't feel like you have to have answers coming from your mind. This is what operating from a place of uncertainty feels like, right? It's you operating from the body. So again, I just wanted to share a little about that today, of how important it is to embrace basically not living from the mind, from the ego mind, and how ultimately a byproduct of not living from the mind and instead living from the body, again, causes this uncertainty. But the main thing that I want you to understand here is that this uncertainty is actually really important, and it means you're on the right path. So I just really want to say, if you're struggling with that and feeling really confused by that and not really knowing how to work with that feeling, right? That first off, it's incredibly natural and normal. We all go through it after our awakening, after our dark night of the soul. And you just want to be present with yourself. And again, do this kind of practice that I just suggested, that other practices you could do. You can even just be walking in silence in nature and taking in, kind of sensory experiences, right? So you can kind of smell the kind of aroma of nature. You can feel the wind hitting your skin, and this takes you out of your mind. And then something really beautiful can come through, that answer that you were wanting from your mind, from your ego mind, that again has historically caused a lot of dysfunction and has never led us on the right path. Now you might begin to, you might receive an answer from the solar plexus center, that is how you're being divinely guided and being, guided on the right path, essentially. There's this quote I really love that says, "The desire for safety stands against every great and noble enterprise." And again, I think that is really fitting for everything I just shared. When we are clinging to certainty, we're not actually able to make progress. We're actually instead hurting ourselves and holding ourselves from so much personal growth on the spiritual path. That was it for today's video. Reach out to me if you want a one-on-one Dharmic healing session. I hope you can all embrace uncertainty a little more each and every day.